everybody knows that there is contentious, a dilemma, whatever you want to call it, in the world of classical singing, where on the one hand, people are like, hey, you need to get in shape. And on the other hand, people are like, getting in shape is bad for your singing. And nobody addresses the fact that caring for your body, exercising in some kind of way and fueling it correctly is good for not only your body and your overall wellness outside of you as a singer, which everybody is. We are more than just singers, but it's good for your soul and for your mind. If we are not caring for our souls and our minds and our bodies, then we are doing a disservice to our ability to actually bring our fullest and best selves to the stage. During my career, which started as a BFA musical theater major at Otterbein University, 2009, and actually prior to that, I was getting serious in the later years of high school. I was really fascinated with what it took to actually become fit. And this is for a variety of reasons. And then it's so complicated, right? Nothing really stands in a vacuum, because we also have to be aware of types and viability. All of this stuff goes together. And just like the human body is a system, if you bust your pinky toe, it's going to affect something in your trap or in your neck. So everything is a system. And for me, this really started to become evident because my breakout role was in high school when I was a junior as Gaston. So obviously, like, Gaston needs to not only sound a certain way and be bought as the audience is a certain way, but needs to look a certain way. And I like to do everything super legit, so I didn't want to have to be using, padding or anything like that. And so over the course of that time frame, I basically was trying to figure out how to do two things: how to be as absolutely in shape as I possibly could be, how to have an awesome body that complements your life without running it, but then also I am equally obsessed, maybe even more obsessed, with realizing my full potential as a singer. So even though I'm no longer singing for money or really in the game, I am a much better singer now than I was when Leah and I were together, and then the couple years after that when I was in the WNO studio, and then the season after that singing principal roles on the WNO stage. So as I've matured in my mind and continue to iterate and experiment, I've got basically everything down to a pretty simple art and science. Science is something that is repeatable and follows a process, and art is something that is intuitive and goes by feel. And so what Leah and I were discussing is me coming here today to be a resource for you both this afternoon and then in an ongoing basis for health, fitness, wellness, nutrition, etc., making that all go together on its own, but then also as it is complementary to your careers as singers. Because even if we just look at Lifting 101, Lifting 101 is actually more similar than it is different to Singing 101. But we got time enough to get into that. So just to be respectful of the time that we do have today here in this limited fashion, I just want to go ahead and open up the floor. Any questions that you guys have. There is really no such thing as a dumb question. There is no such thing as a question that doesn't need to be answered. If it's on your mind, please feel free to ask away. No shame. Okay, this is a very good question. Thank you for asking. It's not basic at all, actually. So when we think about the exercises, right, if you're looking, wherever you're looking, on the internet, some, muscle magazine that you see in a store, you're talking to some personal trainer at the gym is trying to sell you sessions, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation out there. So just as we have different styles of singing, right, jazz, contemporary, pop, musical theater, contemporary, golden age musical theater, opera, etc., we also have different modalities of exercises: barbell, kettlebell, calisthenics, running, whatever you want to do. If we take away those modalities, right, the barbell, the calisthenics, the kettlebell, the dumbbells, what we're left with are movement patterns. And there's only a handful of movement patterns that the human body can exhibit, and they're all natural. This would be a squat. So instead of the barbell, it's just you're squatting. Instead of the deadlift, it's just a hinge, right? You're pushing your hips back to pick something up. Or it's a press, either vertical on the plane or horizontal. Same thing with a pull, horizontal or vertical. And so what's really important to understand there is, just as in singing, right, you're not going to be able to sing any of those styles without sufficient breath pressure and without actual legato. Those are the two things that make the singing world go round. So as long as you understand the sensations that go along with any of those movement patterns, then you are able to not only make the most out of whatever you have available to you whenever you're on the road, or if there's a different setup than your program or normal training has, but you're also able to then carry over those sensations into singing. And so as it relates to singing, if we think about what are the muscles that matter in singing, everybody likes to, some people will say like, oh, sing from the diaphragm or whatever. Well, the diaphragm is an involuntary muscle. So we want to prioritize a couple of things. And actually, this goes beyond lifting, and it's more actually about mobility. So we want to prioritize strengthening the muscles that are going to allow us to control the expiration or the diaphragm's lifting, the diaphragm raising as air is going out. So that might be the intercostals and all the muscles like around or underneath your abs, which are just surface layer muscles, your lats and the muscles in your lower back, the muscles in your glutes, the biggest and strongest muscle in your body. Then you also might want to think about the muscles in the posterior chain. So during what I like to call the coronavirus season 1, I got really into the posterior chain. The posterior chain is like the most important series of muscles in your body. It's everything that's on the back side. Your glutes, your hamstrings, your calves, your feet, your lats, everything back here, your neck, and then ultimately ending in your tongue. And like I said, I'm more obsessed with singing than I am with fitness. And so this was primarily an investigation into doing everything that I could to become a better singer. Because of the nature of our lifestyle here in the comfortable 21st century, we spend most of our time sitting, we walk around on squishy cushioned shoes, and we chew foods that are very soft. What this results in is an atrophy from top to bottom of the posterior chain. This is critically important to becoming, if nothing else, the most realized singer that you possibly can, because the muscles in our feet allow for us to root firmly into the ground, which you actually need to support. Leah, how much of a physical activity is it to sing a Verdi opera?
Oh, it's like doing a leg day. It's a full body workout.
Right.
Like 3 hour long weightlifting session with a 5K thrown in there.
Right. And so it is like if you're whatever it is that you're lifting, when you're gripping something, the firmness and consistency across all the surface area of your grip is what basically gives permission to the rest of your muscles to fire harder. So if your grip is really lax, no matter how hard you're pushing, your muscles are not going to get the permission that they need to actually fire as hard as they can or that you want them to. Similarly, if the muscles in our feet are atrophied, then we can't really grip or root into the ground enough to give permission to our entire body to activate the muscles that we want in order to create that pressure and to sustain that pressure. So we also want to be mindful of the tongue posture, because if we have better tongue posture, our breathing is going to be better, which is going to result in us being overall more calm, more collected on or off stage, but also you are going to have less resistance when you are trying to use your articulators and not your jaw, which gets the larynx involved, to make up the sounds that form words and unify our sound. So things that would be really important would be making sure that you are basically training the muscles in your feet, and that you are training your tongue muscle properly, and that you are training your breath. This is known in some internet circles as mewing. Very ridiculous, but this is just something that I started doing because I wanted to have better tongue posture. It basically means that you have your tongue in its most natural position, which is suctioned gently to the roof of your mouth, and that you are breathing through your nose at all times. And then I rip out the soles in all of my shoes, and that's how I walk around. And what I noticed was an immediate, not only change in my foot shape, but also strength in my ability to grip the ground in everything that I was doing. So all of that is going to set you up for getting more out of any lift or really exercise. But otherwise, just as long as you're training all of the movement patterns in any modality that you want, you're going to be a stronger singer and a stronger person physically in general. The other thing that I mentioned is mobility. So on this quest, I did a certification that required me to really unlock my thoracic spine mobility, both thoracic and hip mobility. this guy in this workshop, he's like, hey, put your arms next to your head. And I was like, all right, or put your biceps next to yours. I was like, okay. And I went like this because my body mapping was so off that I thought that my biceps were next to my head. And he led me through this evolution, basically this stretch called a bretzel. And after I did that bretzel, he got up and he gave me the same evaluation. And then my arms went like this. And I was like, whoa. And in that, I felt finally, right there in that workshop, I could actually feel my diaphragm dropping and raising, and I could actually take a proper breath for the first time in my entire life. So part of the reason that training the posterior chain is so critical is because it keeps us, if your posterior chain is atrophied and weak, our bodies tend to have anterior pelvic tilt. Let me show you what this looks like. Anterior pelvic tilt is when you basically are doing this. We walk around like this. Without anterior pelvic tilt, we're like that. And that is how you're supposed to stand when you're singing. Having your thoracic. And so when you tilt your pelvis into its proper position and your thoracic mobility is opened up, your diaphragm actually can drop and you don't have to work or think so hard in order to get the sensation. Like, right, breath only ever goes into the lungs. Sound only ever comes from the larynx, but we imagine all of these different cues because the voice is not an instrument that we can play like a piano, press a note and then we get an A. We have to imagine it. But if we can line up our bodies in this way, then it takes us less mental work and it becomes more automatic and there's less resistance. We turn our bodies into an asset instead of a liability. There's less friction. And so whatever you can do to correct that anterior pelvic tilt, strengthen your posterior chain and open up thoracic spine mobility is going to be very beneficial for your singing. Interested in longevity and being... All right. You don't want to ever stretch before you contract a muscle. You want to stretch after you lift. So when you are warming up, look, so I'm very proud of the fact that, knock on wood, the only times that I've gotten injured in the gym have when I've been doing something like a CrossFit class, which is endemically really poor, non-safe programming and has nothing to do with actual wellness. The way to warm up is just like in singing. The purpose of a system is what it does. So stretching doesn't really have to do anything with whatever the muscle group that you're going to be hitting is that day, even if it's multiple muscle groups. And similarly, running on the treadmill and getting warm doesn't really prepare you for whatever that day's training is, unless you're running. So the best way to warm up is to go through the movement pattern that you are going to be doing. And I will warm up for every lift. Like if, for example, like yesterday, I did legs. I start with a leg curl. I don't just go to my working weight, the heaviest set, or like really the first set that counts. I start very, very light, and then I treat that set. I only do a handful of reps. I treat that set as if it were my working weight. What I'm looking for is mind-muscle connection and overall form, and I'm making sure that all the different muscle groups are on and that the setup is perfect and that I'm actually doing what I want to be doing. Then I will go to about 50 or like 60% of my working weight, and I'll do a couple reps there, and then I'll do a couple, like 1 or 2 reps at something heavier, because strength is also neurological. So you need to prepare your nervous system for the weight that you're going to be moving, not just the muscles. And then I go to the working weight, and then I do my sets there. Then I'm warmed up, right? But then my next thing is leg extensions. So I'm going to do the exact same sequence for leg extensions. And then I go to whatever I'm doing for the squat movement pattern. And I don't just jump right into my working weight. I start with as little weight as possible, and I follow that same sequence. So, for example, as you mentioned, you hurt your pec. I'll do the same. If I'm going to be hitting chest, I always start by hitting back, because you want to make sure that the hallmark of an advanced trainee, or somebody, aka somebody who really knows what they're doing in the gym, is that their antagonistic muscles are able to work as synergists. So when you can get your lats to be working with you when you are doing any kind of pressing movement, not only are you going to be safer and less prone to injury, but you're also going to be able to express more force, which means you're moving more weight and you're also building more muscle. So are you tracking thus far? What are you hearing me say? And if you are rushed and you're pressed for time, one, get better at time management. Two, what you want to do is you also want to learn basically just some executive thinking or executive function skills, which would be, all right, it's better to do one thing today in the gym really, really well than it is to do everything else haphazardly or not go at all. So you just pick whatever it is that you have time for that's going to matter the most. So you're trying to get swole. Listen, I totally understand the desire to get swollen to train your body. You know, what is the muscle group that you're trying to get swollen the most right now?
God.
And this is the other thing that you want to consider. What actually gives the appearance of swole? It's actually not chest at all. Not chest at all. It's back and it's shoulders. So in that case, what you could have done is you could have just focused on either back and or shoulders. If you've only got time for, let's say you've only got 30 minutes in the gym instead of 60, then you just go and you follow that same sequence that we were just talking about of warming up, warm up your back, and then hit 1 or 2 really great sets of a back lift. Then you do the same thing for shoulders, which basically is going to be, I don't really do any lateral raises or anything like that. I just do compound lifts for shoulders because overhead press or military press, to Leah's point, is the perfect shoulder exercise because it hits all 3 heads of the deltoid. Then you're in, you're out, you've gotten your work done, and you're good. And it also moves in the way that your body and your joints want to move. It's why I don't use a barbell. I use kettlebells for that because they're more ergonomic. I'm as connected to my breath and as engaged in my body during a leg press as I am in a bicep curl. So the more that you can implement the principles of creating intra-abdominal pressure and sustaining it during a lift, that's just like singing. The difference between singing and lifting is that we are not holding our breath when we sing. We are controlling the expiration. But otherwise, the creation of intra-abdominal pressure, aka support, is exactly the same. So whatever as long as in everything that you do, you are incredibly intentional about creating and exploring what those sensations of intra-abdominal pressure are, that's going to translate into the practice room so that you are more in touch with that muscle memory, those neurological pathways that let you know, great, I'm connected to my support. And then it's just reps, reps, reps. When it comes to singing coloratura, I think that what you're going to really want to focus on is just leaning more and giving less gas here. The lighter effort that you can give here at the level of the folds and the more relaxed that you can be, I think the better time that you're going to have.